standing at my wife's grave with rain soaking through my cheap black suit, my son handed me a brochure for a state-run nursing home and told me I had 48 hours to get out of the house I built with my own hands. They thought I was weak. They thought I was some broke old guy they could toss aside like garbage. They had no idea that the small brass key Sarah left behind would unlock a secret worth $28 million and turn their world upside down. My name is Patrick Sullivan, and I'm 63 years old. I spent 40 years at Cleveland Steelworks, starting as a welder and working my way up to plant supervisor. I paid my taxes, loved my family, and trusted my wife with everything. But standing there in that muddy cemetery watching them lower Sarah's casket into the ground, I realized trust doesn't always go both ways. The pastor finished his prayer. The few friends who came were heading back to their cars, giving me quick condolences as they passed. I stood alone by the grave, waiting for my son, Daniel, to come over, waiting for him to put his hand on my shoulder and tell me we'd get through this together. Instead, I watched him standing 20 yards away under a big black umbrella with his wife, Michelle. They weren't crying. They were whispering, checking their phones, looking at their watches like they had somewhere better to be. I took a step toward them. My knees hurt in the cold, but I just wanted to go home. Sit in my recliner, smell what was left of Sarah's perfume, maybe drink that beer I'd been saving. But before I could even ask for a ride, Michelle broke away from Daniel and walked toward me. Her heels sank into the mud with every step. "Patrick," she said. "Not Dad or Pop, just Patrick. We need to talk about what happens next." I looked at her, confused. My wife had been dead for less than 10 minutes. "Michelle, can't this wait? I'm tired." "That's exactly the problem," she said, pulling a folded paper from her purse. It was wet from the rain, but I could see the logo clear. Enough. Shady Pines Assisted Living. The kind of place that smells like bleach and sadness. "What is this?" I asked. "Your new living situation," Michelle said. Her voice was cold. "Look, Patrick, let's be realistic here. You're 63 with a pension that barely covers your medication. Sarah was the one who handled the money, kept everything running. Without her, you'll be broke in 3 months." I felt my face get hot. I looked at Daniel, who was staring at his shoes. "Son, what's she talking about? That's my house. I paid the mortgage for 30 years. Daniel finally looked up, but he couldn't look me in the eye. "Dad, it's complicated. The house, well, the deed was in Mom's name. 6 months ago, when she got really sick, she signed papers transferring it to us. To protect it." I felt like someone punched me in the gut. "That's impossible. We did everything together." "We had to protect the asset," Michelle jumped in, stepping between me and Daniel. "If you got sick, the government would take the house to pay for your care. We saved it. But now with Sarah gone, we have to sell. Daniel has business debts. We can't afford to let you live alone in a 4-bedroom house eating up our inheritance." Our inheritance. Those words hung in the cold air. They weren't talking about my home. They were talking about their payday. "We already called a real estate agent," Michelle kept going, checking her nails. "She's coming Monday morning for photos. That gives you 48 hours to pack your stuff. We'll hire people to clear out the rest next week." "The rest?" I whispered. "You mean our life, your mother's things." "It's just stuff, Patrick," Michelle snapped. "Don't be dramatic. We found a room at Shady Pines that fits your budget. It's shared, so you'll have a roommate. Good for socialization. The truck comes Sunday night to take you there." I looked at Daniel. My son. The boy I taught to drive, to change oil, to be a man. "You can't do this. I'm your father." "We're not throwing you on the street." Michelle sighed like she was talking to a kid. "We're putting you in a home. It's safe. And honestly, Patrick, it's what Sarah would have wanted. She wouldn't want you to be a burden on us." That word burden broke something inside me. For 40 years I worked overtime. I drove used trucks so they could have nice cars. I skipped vacations so Daniel could go to college. And now they were throwing me away like broken equipment. I stood up straighter. I felt angry. Really angry. So you're giving me 48 hours? Yes. Sunday night. Be ready. She turned and walked back to Daniel, who mumbled, "Sorry, Dad," and followed her like a trained dog. They got in their car and drove off, leaving me standing alone in the rain. I'd never felt so betrayed in my life. But walking to my old pickup truck, I remembered something. Sarah's weird habit of locking her desk drawer every time she left the room, and the calendar in the kitchen where every Monday for as long as I could remember, she wrote the same thing. Bank 9 a.m. They thought I was finished, but if I knew Sarah, she didn't leave me with nothing. She left me something to work with. The drive home felt like forever. I pulled up, and my heart dropped. The front door was wide open, letting cold air into our house. I walked in and found Daniel and Michelle going through our stuff like vultures. Cabinets were open, drawers dumped on the floor. Daniel was in the kitchen holding a bottle of wine, the one I'd bought for our 30th anniversary and saved in the basement. He was pouring it into a coffee mug like it was cheap beer. "Daniel, no!" I yelled. "That was for your mother and me." He took a long drink and made a face. "Relax, Dad. It's vinegar anyway. You waited too long to open it. It's spoiled, like everything else here." I grabbed the bottle away from him. Wine spilled on the floor like blood. "Get out! Both of you get out!" Slow clapping started behind me. Michelle was standing there holding Sarah's jewelry box, the one I'd made for her 40th birthday. "Oh, Patrick, you're really confused, aren't you?" She clicked across the kitchen in her heels. "You keep saying my house and my things. But let's look at reality. You retired at 58 because of your back. Your pension sucks. You handed every paycheck to Sarah because you didn't want to deal with money. You never put your name on accounts. You let her handle everything while you played the simple, happy husband." She got closer. Sarah was the one who managed this family's money. Now that she's gone, everything belongs to the estate, to us. You're just a dependent, Patrick. You've been living off her management for years. I looked at Daniel. He wouldn't look back at me, just poured more wine. I felt completely alone. I had trusted my wife with everything, never thinking I'd need protection from my own son. I couldn't fight them. Not when I felt this messed up from losing Sarah. I walked down the hall to Sarah's sewing room and locked the door. I leaned against it and slid down to the floor, listening to them tear apart my life. That's when I felt something cold in my jacket pocket. A key. Small, brass, with the number 404 stamped on it. I'd found it earlier in Sarah's jewelry box, but forgot about it with everything happening. I sat there in the dark for hours. Finally, the noise stopped as they left, taking silver and wine and whatever dignity I had left. But I had this key, and I had questions that needed answers. I got up and turned on the desk lamp. This room was Sarah's space. If there were answers anywhere, they'd be here. I opened her filing cabinet and started going through papers. Tax returns, utility bills, insurance stuff. Normal things. But I couldn't find the deed to our house. And when I looked at the property tax records, the name wasn't Patrick and Sarah Sullivan. It said the Sarah Sullivan Trust, dated 6 months ago. Michelle wasn't lying. My wife had signed away our home without telling me a word about it. But why? I looked at Sarah's bookshelf full of little calendars. She wrote everything down. Never used a computer or smartphone. Just these pocket calendars she bought every year. I pulled down this year's, then last year's, then one from 10 years back. I laid them out on her sewing table, looking for something, though I didn't know what. Then I saw it. Starting in 1978, every Monday, written in blue ink. 9 to M, meet C. I flipped to July 1985. 9 to AM, meet C. October 1999. 9 a.m. Meet C. February 2018. 9 a.m. Meet C. For 45 years, Sarah had an appointment every Monday at 9 a.m. with someone called C. Never missed a week. Not when Daniel was sick as a kid. Not when it snowed. Not even on holidays. Those days she moved it to Tuesday. Who was C? I tried to remember our Monday mornings. Sarah would get dressed nice, tell me she was running errands or meeting a friend for coffee. When I asked to come along once, she smiled and said I'd be bored. She never let me come. Not once in 45 years. I ran my hand under her sewing table, feeling around. The wood felt smooth, but then I found something odd. A crack that didn't belong there. I pressed on it and heard a click. A hidden drawer dropped down from under the table. Inside, sitting on old velvet, was another key. Brass, heavy, with fancy teeth and a logo I knew. Cleveland First Bank. Box 404. C wasn't a person. C was Cleveland First Bank. But that made no sense. We banked at the credit union near my old job. Sarah had no reason to go to Cleveland First every week for 45 years. And why hide the key? I held that brass key tight in my hand. Sarah was practical about everything. She wouldn't hide something for 45 years unless it mattered. Big time. I looked at the clock. 3 a.m. Banks didn't open for 6 more hours. 6 hours of wondering if I was about to find a fortune or a debt that would destroy me. But for the first time since she died, I had somewhere to go. I had a purpose. Monday morning came gray and cold. I stood outside Cleveland First Bank in my funeral suit, the only decent one I owned. I looked rough, like someone coming to beg for help. I walked through the big glass doors into the fancy lobby with marble floors and high ceilings. A young woman at the teller window looked up when I got to her station. Her name tag said Nicole. "Can I help you, sir?" "I'm here about a safety deposit box." I pulled out the brass key and put it on the counter. Nicole looked annoyed. "Sir, you need an appointment for box access, and we're booked until—" She stopped talking and stared at the key. She touched the number 404, then looked at the old bank logo. Her face went white. "What's your name?" "Patrick Sullivan." She typed fast on her computer, then grabbed her phone and hit a red button. "Please wait here, Mr. Sullivan. Don't leave." I heard footsteps coming fast across the lobby. A man in an expensive suit was almost running toward me. He was older, maybe 65, with gray hair and the kind of confidence that comes with money. He stopped in front of me, looking at my face hard. "Mr. Sullivan," he said. Then he did something that shocked everyone watching. He put his arms around me and hugged me tight. "We've been waiting for you, Patrick. Sarah told me you'd come the first Monday after she passed." He stepped back, and I could see his eyes were wet. "I'm Christopher Bennett, the branch manager. I'm so sorry about Sarah. She was an amazing woman." I couldn't speak. "Mr. Bennett, I found this key. I don't know if she owed money or—" Bennett laughed. "Owe us money? Patrick, no, come with me." He led me through doors that needed a card to open, down a hallway with thick carpet and old paintings on the walls. Other employees looked up as we passed, their eyes getting wide, seeing the bank manager escorting some guy in a wrinkled suit. We got to a big steel door at the end of the hall. Bennett put his hand on some kind of scanner. A green light flashed and heavy locks turned, with a deep sound. He opened the door. It was a small room with metal boxes covering every wall, floor to ceiling. In the middle was a wooden table with 2 chairs. Bennett walked to a section of boxes and stopped at 404. It was bigger than most of the others. "You have the key, Patrick?" I handed it to him. My hand was shaking bad. Bennett took another key from his pocket and put both keys in the locks. He turned them at the same time. Click. He pulled out a long metal drawer. It was heavy. I could tell from how he had to lift it. He carried it to the table. "Sit down, Patrick." I sat and stared at that gray metal box. "Mr. Bennett, just tell me straight. Did she do something wrong?" Bennett looked at me with respect in his eyes. "Wrong?" "Patrick, your wife was the smartest investor I've ever worked with. For 45 years, she came here every Monday. She sat in my office. We had coffee, and she built something incredible." He opened the box. I was ready for the worst. Piles of bills, legal papers saying we owed money. But what I saw was different. Thick papers with fancy writing, stock certificates, deeds, bonds. I picked up the first one. It was stock in a computer company from 1982. A company I knew had become huge. The number of shares made my head spin. I grabbed another paper, a deed to some commercial building downtown. Another one for apartment buildings. "What is this?" I asked. "This," Bennett said quietly, "is what she did with the money you gave her every week. You remember that $50 you handed her for household stuff? She didn't just save it, Patrick. She invested it. She bought when everyone else was scared and selling. She held on when everyone else was panicking. She built this empire for you." I looked back at all those papers filling the box. "How much are we talking about?" Bennett took a deep breath. "We valued everything last week, like she asked us to before she got too sick. The current worth of everything, stocks, real estate, bonds, is about $28 million. The room started spinning. $28 million. I was getting kicked out because I couldn't pay for a nursing home, and sitting right here was enough money to buy the whole place. Why didn't she tell me? "Because she knew Daniel," Bennett said. "She knew that if your son found out about this money, he'd tear you apart to get it. She protected you, Patrick, right until the end." He reached back into the box and pulled out a small black book. "She left you this too. Said you'd need it when the time came." I opened it. On the first page, in Sarah's handwriting. "For Patrick, use this when they show you who they really are." I ran my finger over those words. Sarah knew. She knew exactly what Daniel and Michelle would do, and she'd given me the weapons to fight back. "Mr. Bennett," I said, closing the book, "I think I need a lawyer." Bennett smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone ready for war. "I've got the best one in Cleveland waiting in my office right now. Should we go see him?" Bennett led me up to his office on the top floor. Big windows looking out over Cleveland, leather chairs, the whole power setup. Waiting there was a man in his 50s wearing a suit that probably cost more than my truck. He stood up when we walked in. "Patrick Sullivan," Bennett said. "Meet Anthony Richardson, best estate lawyer in Ohio. Anthony, this is Patrick." Richardson shook my hand firm. "I've been waiting for this day, Mr. Sullivan. Sarah briefed me extensively about your situation. We're going to make this right." I sat down, still holding that black book. "What exactly did my wife tell you?" "Everything," Richardson said, opening a thick file. "She came to me 8 months ago when she got her diagnosis. She knew Daniel and Michelle would show their true colors the minute she was gone. She prepared for war." He pulled out papers. "First, let's talk about the trust. Everything, the house, the investments, all $28 million, is in the Sarah Sullivan Living Trust. You're the sole trustee and beneficiary. Daniel and Michelle have zero legal claim to anything. But they said the house was transferred to them." "Lie," Richardson said flat. "They may have forged something to scare you, but I have the real documents right here. Sarah was too smart to let that happen." Bennett poured coffee while Richardson kept talking. "Now about that black book Sarah left you. Open it up." I opened the cover. Page after page of Daniel screw-ups, all in Sarah's neat handwriting. Dates, amounts, details. $75,000 for a DUI settlement in 2010, $85,000 for gambling debts in 2015, $120,000 for failed business loans over the years. Your wife bailed Daniel out of everything, but she documented it all. According to the trust terms, these were loans, not gifts. They're all due immediately upon her death. I looked at the numbers. That's $280,000. Plus interest and legal fees closer to $320,000. But here's the beautiful part. Sarah knew they'd kick you out and treat you like garbage, so she left instructions for a test. Richardson smiled like a shark. We're going to give them one last chance to be human beings. You're going to call Daniel, tell him you need help with a medical emergency, something that requires $75,000 fast. Heart surgery, let's say. Life or death situation. See what they do. And if they refuse, then we destroy them. Legally, financially, completely. We call in the loans, evict them from the house, freeze their accounts, everything. Bennett leaned forward. Patrick, your wife spent 45 years building you an empire. Not just for the money, but for the power. The power to teach ungrateful children what happens when you bite the hand that fed you. I thought about Daniel pouring out my anniversary wine, about Michelle calling me a burden, about them going through our house like vultures. When do we start? Right now, Richardson said. Call Daniel. Tell him you're at the emergency room, Chester. Pains. They want to do surgery immediately, but your insurance won't cover it all. You need $75,000 by tomorrow, or they won't do the operation. I picked up my phone. My hands weren't shaking anymore. What if he says yes? Then you win your son back, and we'll reconsider everything. But Patrick, based on Sarah's analysis of his character, we both know what's going to happen. I dialed Daniel's number. He answered on the third ring. Dad? Why are you calling so late? Daniel, I'm at Cleveland General. I had chest pains, they brought me in an ambulance. I made my voice weak, scared. Son, they want to operate tomorrow morning. Some kind of heart procedure. But my insurance, they're saying I owe $75,000 up front or they won't do it. Silence on the other end. Then, Dad, are you serious right now? I'm scared, Daniel. The doctor says if we wait, I could have a massive heart attack. I could die. I need your help. Please. Another long pause. Dad, we just talked about this. We don't have $75,000 lying around. That's exactly why we need to sell the house, because of situations like this. You can't expect us to— I'm your father, I said, putting real pain in my voice. I'm asking for my life. Dad, be realistic. We have our own debts. Michelle's car payment, my business loans. We can't just magic up $75,000 because you didn't plan better. Maybe call the hospital social worker. They have programs for indigent patients. Indigent? He called me indigent. My own son. So that's it? You're going to let me die? Dad, stop being dramatic. These things work out. The hospital won't let you die. They'll figure something out. But we can't help. We just can't. The line went dead. He hung up on me. I put the phone down and looked at Richardson and Bennett. They were both smiling, but not happy smiles. Cold smiles. Well? Richardson asked. He failed. Then let's begin, Richardson said, pulling out more papers. I'm filing emergency motions in the morning. By noon, tomorrow, Daniel and Michelle will discover their world has collapsed. Bank accounts frozen. Eviction notice served. Loan default papers filed. Bennett stood up. Patrick, tomorrow afternoon we're having a meeting in our big conference room. We're telling Daniel and Michelle we found Sarah's will. They'll come expecting to divide up the house money. Instead, Richardson finished, they're going to learn about $28 million they can't touch and $320,000 in debts they have to pay. Immediately. I stood up too. For the first time in days, I felt strong. Gentlemen, I think it's time my son learned what his mother really thought of him. 3 days later, I sat at the head of the conference table in Richardson's office. The room was built to intimidate. 42nd floor, windows overlooking the whole city, table big enough to land a plane on. I wore a new charcoal suit that cost more than my monthly pension. My hair was cut and styled. For the first time in years, I looked like someone you don't mess with. Richardson organized his files like a surgeon prepping for an operation. "They're late. Classic power move." "Let them play games," I said, sipping expensive coffee. I'd waited 45 years for the truth. A few minutes meant nothing now. The double doors swung open, and Daniel walked in with Michelle, all loud voices and attitude. Michelle wore sunglasses inside and a bright red dress, too flashy for someone supposedly mourning. Daniel looked smug in his polo shirt and khakis. They were so confident, already calculating their profits from selling my house. "Okay, let's get this done," Michelle announced, throwing her purse on the table. "Just give us the papers to sign for the house transfer. We've got a realtor meeting at 2. She thinks we can get $420,000, maybe more in this market." She stopped talking when she saw me. For a second, her brain couldn't process what she was seeing. The man in the expensive suit sitting in the power seat couldn't be the father-in-law she'd kicked out 3 nights ago. "Patrick?" she asked, taking off her sunglasses. "What are you wearing? What are you doing here?" Daniel spun around, eyes going wide. "Dad, what's this about? Did you rent a tux or something?" He laughed, but it sounded nervous. "You look ridiculous. Who are you trying to impress? Did you blow your last Social Security check on clothes just to come here and beg again? Because we already told you. The answer is still no." I didn't say anything. I just looked at him steady, calm. Then I nodded to Richardson. Richardson cleared his throat loud enough to cut through Daniel's mockery. "Sit down, Mr. Sullivan. You too, Mrs. Sullivan. We have a lot to discuss, and my hourly rate doesn't stop for family drama." They sat reluctantly, looking confused and worried now. "We're here because you said you found a will," Michelle said, crossing her arms. "We figured Sarah died intestate since we couldn't find one, but it doesn't matter. The house was transferred to us before she died through power of attorney. That's done. We just need to clear up any small accounts she might have had." Richardson opened his folder. "Actually, Mrs. Sullivan, that's completely wrong. The power of attorney you're referring to was superseded 6 months ago when Sarah established the Sarah Sullivan Living Trust and transferred all assets into it." Michelle shrugged. "Fine, so it's in a trust. We're the heirs. Just dissolve it and give us the money. Same difference." Richardson took off his glasses and looked at them like they were idiots. "You seem to think the house is the main asset, and you seem to think you're the beneficiaries." He pulled out a paper. "Your mother wasn't just a housewife clipping coupons. She was an investor, a very sophisticated one. For 45 years, she built a diversified portfolio." Daniel laughed out loud. "Mom, investing? She bought store brand everything. She drove that old Honda until the wheels fell off. She was cheap as dirt." "She was disciplined," Richardson corrected, "because she understood the real value of money, unlike some people in this room." He slid the paper toward them. "The total current value of the Sarah Sullivan Living Trust is $28,250,000. Dead silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Michelle's mouth fell open. Daniel's face went white as paper. They stared at that number like it might disappear. 28, Michelle whispered. Million? With an M? Million, Richardson confirmed. I watched their faces transform completely. Shock became pure greed in about 2 seconds. Michelle was already mentally buying a mansion. Daniel was planning early retirement. She reached across the table toward me with both hands. Patrick, this is incredible. Mom was a secret genius. We had no idea she was this smart. We're rich. We're all incredibly rich. I didn't take her hands. Richardson cleared his throat again, louder this time. You missed something very important in what I just said. The assets are in the trust. You are not the beneficiaries. Michelle's hands froze in midair. What do you mean? We're her children, her only children. Who else would inherit everything? Richardson flipped the page with dramatic timing. According to the trust documents filed 6 months ago, the sole trustee and primary beneficiary with complete discretionary control over all distributions is Mr. Patrick Sullivan. You have absolutely no legal claim to a single penny unless Patrick decides to give you something. The greed died in their eyes instantly, replaced by pure terror. They looked at me, and for the first time in their lives saw not a victim or a burden, but the man who controlled their entire future. I leaned forward slowly. I think we have some serious business to discuss now, and you're sitting in my chair. Michelle jumped up so fast her chair crashed over backward. That's impossible. He's confused. He's old. 3 days ago he called us crying about some heart surgery bill. Richardson smiled like a shark smelling blood. Mr. Sullivan is not confused. Before finalizing this trust, Sarah required full neurological competency evaluations from 2 independent doctors. As for the surgery story, that was a test. A test of your compassion and family loyalty when your father needed you most. A test you both failed spectacularly. Michelle's face went completely white. She realized the begging, the desperation, the life-or-death plea for help. It was all performance. And she'd walked straight into the trap. Daniel made a choking sound. You lied to us, Dad. You totally tricked us. I tested you, I said calmly. There's a difference. Richardson wasn't finished destroying them. He pulled out more papers. Since you're currently living in trust property without the trustee's permission, you're legally trespassing. This is your formal eviction notice. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. 24 hours? Daniel's voice cracked. But where will we go? We gave up our apartment lease. You moved in to save rent money, I said. That's not my problem to solve. Richardson placed the black ledger on the table like he was laying down a royal flush. One final matter. Your mother kept meticulous records of every financial bailout she provided Daniel over the years. DUI settlements, gambling debt payments, failed business loans, total amount $320,000. According to the trust terms, these weren't gifts. They were interest-free loans, all due immediately upon her death. You have 30 days to repay in full. It was the killing blow. Michelle slumped in her chair, realizing she'd already spent money on cars and clothes that she never actually had. But Daniel broke completely. He slid out of his chair onto his knees on the expensive carpet, crawling toward me like a beggar. Dad, please, he sobbed, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry. We're both so sorry. Please don't do this to us. I can't pay back $320,000. I don't have it. Dad, please, we're family. Blood family. I looked down at him. The man who'd called me an indigent patient, who'd hung up the phone when he thought I was dying and needed his help. I searched his face for real remorse, genuine love for his father. But all I saw was fear for his own skin. I stood up. Daniel's hand slipped off my jacket. I tucked the black ledger under my arm like Sarah had taught me to do. You're absolutely right, Daniel. We are family. And family teaches the hardest lessons when love alone isn't enough. I turned to Richardson. File everything, all of it, today. I walked to the doors. Behind me, I heard Michelle whisper my name like she was seeing a ghost. Heard Daniel sobbing on the floor like a broken child. I didn't stop walking. I stepped into the elevator, and when those doors closed, cutting off the sound of their destroyed world, I felt real peace for the first time in months. 6 months later, I sit in my new office at the Sarah Sullivan Foundation. Every Monday at 9 a.m., just like she did for 45 years, I review applications from elderly people who've been betrayed by family, who need help and a second chance. Daniel works third shift at a warehouse now, finally learning what it means to earn his own way. Michelle moved back to her mother's house in Ohio, chasing some other get-rich scheme. Sarah didn't just leave me money. She left me dignity, power, and purpose. My wife went to the bank every Monday for 45 years to prepare for the day her own son would throw me away like garbage. She built me an empire so I'd never be helpless or dependent again. The people closest to you can sometimes turn out to be the cruelest, but it's never too late to fight back and reclaim your life. Sometimes the greatest act of love is teaching the ungrateful exactly what they've lost, because only when they hit rock bottom will they learn to value what they once had.